Welcome to Housing for Good, a podcast dedicated to housing topics and issues affecting our communities in McPherson County and beyond. With years of experience and expertise, hosts Chris Goodson and Karolyn Moore discuss housing challenges and opportunities with other experts from a variety of housing fields.
Good afternoon and welcome to Housing for Good. I'm Karolyn.
And I'm Chris.
And we are here to do part 2 of our discussion about the special committee that met and the people that gave presentation and testimony in front of that committee. We referenced Christina Ashley Guidry in our last episode. She's with the Kansas Housing Advocacy Network, and she's also with the United Community Services of Johnson County. So, Chris, do you want to pick it up on some of what she talked about?
So the first slide that she has here that we were going to reference is we are all on the same housing continuum. We might be in different places on it, but we're all on that continuum. So it starts with homelessness, and then it moves all the way through to home ownership. So you fall somewhere on that continuum. Maybe you're in an emergency shelter, or maybe you're in subsidized market rent somewhere, or you own your own home, or maybe you're some kind of transitional housing, but everybody falls on that. And it doesn't matter if it's you, your parents, your children, or your grandkids, you're going to be on this continuum. And so that's the thing we have to keep in our mind, is that we all fall within that continuum. And it's not just us, it's people that work in our communities, like first responders and teachers and childcare workers, public works, snow shoveling, people who are out there doing the work that we are counting on in order for us to be able to live in our communities.
Absolutely. And then another thing that she talked about was how we had gaps. We had gaps in 2021 with a history of underbuilding housing, inadequate housing supply, especially townhomes and duplexes for Kansas' aging population. She talked about the age of the housing stock that we currently have across the state and the dramatically increased housing costs. Now, those were findings from 2021. In 2024, we still have many challenges, and that is 6.5% to 7% interest rates. Inflation, construction has increased, and private equity home purchasers are coming in and buying up huge plots of houses, numbers of houses, and then they want to flip them and raise the rent. And the people that own them then don't even live here. They're not local landlords. So that's a problem also.
Yeah, and then you look at the Kansas income and housing. So 28.3% of Kansas are low income. That is 807,390 individuals. That is a lot. It's under 1 million people, but that's a lot of people that are in that category. A family of 3, that would be $46,060 a year, $3,838 a month. And to me, $46,000 a year doesn't sound like it'd be that low, does it?
It doesn't.
That's what's shocking. When I saw that, I was like, well, wait a minute, that's not that bad.
Yeah.
But then if you're trying to support yourself and a spouse and your kids and everybody else, at that point, then maybe, and consider the income, what rent would be, maybe then it wouldn't be great. And then the other part was, so this really blows my mind as well. There's Kansas, and then this is Kansas, this isn't across the country, has 41 affordable housing units for every 100 households that need them.
Yeah.
41. I mean, that's not even 50%.
Yeah.
That's really scary.
It is. And, I want to say that yearly income of $46,060 for a family of 3, we look at that and think, wow, they make a pretty good living. But I think that we have that thought because the folks that we normally help in our programs are extremely low. And so they probably live on about half of what that guideline is giving, which is also very scary because, you can be doing twice as well as the families that qualify for our programs and still be considered low income.
So, and then you look at this next one, it's housing cost burden. It says here, the median rent in Kansas is over $1,000. So if you look at that one example we just had, that's over a third of that income.
Yeah.
Which is actually not terrible, but it's still pretty high. And then 43% of renters are housing cost burden, which means they do pay over 30% of their income toward their housing costs. So that's really high to have 43% of your people that are cost burden versus when you look at only 33% of homeowners are housing cost burden. So there's a 10% gap there between somebody who owns their home and somebody who rents. I've always said it's more affordable to own your own home.
Oh, absolutely.
As long as you're able to afford for those maintenance and cost repairs.
Yeah.
It's so much more affordable. And you're building equity and you're building wealth. And that wealth goes on to your children and your grandchildren, and then it helps your family stabilize, over time.
Well, and then, another thing that she talked about was how 659,420 Kansas jobs fall into 5 occupational categories. So you have office and administrative support, transportation and material moving, sales, food prep and serving, and production. Those 5 categories of jobs, actually, there was only 2 of them that make more than that $46,060 a year. So the majority of the people in those particular occupations, those are low-income jobs to begin with.
Well, if you look at this also, the median mortgage is $1,635. So none of these working families here can afford to buy a house.
Yeah. And they can barely afford to pay the rent that they're being forced to, cough up each month. So it was just really interesting. It's very discouraging, but at the same time, I think, like I said in the last podcast, it's got everybody talking. All of the players are coming to the table now to discuss the situation that our families are in and what they're facing. And then the Kansas Housing Advocacy Network, they came up with 3 points that they want to take to Topeka, to the legislators, and talk with them about what needs to happen to help the people on our continuum of care when it comes to housing. So we need to build the housing and maintain it, affordable housing, attainable housing where Kansans need it. We need to act upstream to keep Kansans housed and provide housing with supportive services to stabilize Kansans that find themselves in homelessness. And I would expound on that to say, not just homeless folks, but any low-income renters, they need those supports to keep housed and keep themselves stable, because most of them are just one crisis away from finding themselves out of a home or in serious trouble.
Well, and then when you look at the types of jobs as well, most of the people who are office and admin support, they make way less than the average rent. Mm-hmm. In almost every area of the state of Kansas, almost every single area, they cannot afford to live within our state unless they have a spouse or a significant other that can help pay that rent, which is crazy that these are working families who are in admin and office and admin support, secretaries and people that support, the important jobs that are going on in our factories and our colleges and our different areas. They can't afford to live here. Now, if you get into more of the production, a lot of those people are doing better. They can afford to be here. And sales, that was kind of a mixed bag there. The only place they can afford to live in Kansas is in western Kansas, where maybe the costs are a little bit lower.
Yeah.
But no other place in the state could they really afford to be within our state. And so we're making it very difficult for families to want to live here, raise their children here, and grow old here if we can't afford to be within our state.
And we've said it before, when you look at food prep and serving, that's any restaurant that you want to go out to eat at. Well, everybody says, we need more restaurants. Okay, well, we can barely take care of the people that live here now that have these jobs. So what kind of prices are we going to have to pay to, bring in even more?
Yeah, and that's a thing that most people don't realize is when you think about affordable housing, people really do think that you don't have a job.
Yeah.
That people that we're working with, people who are struggling, well, they just need to get a job. Well, I would say 80 to 90% of our people have jobs, or they get a job as soon as they work with us.
Yeah.
And they still cannot find affordable housing that matches the needs of their family and their income. Mm-hmm. And so I hope that people take away from this that this is affecting people that people that are working in your community, people that you count on to help you be able to stay in the hospital, or maybe they're the parent in your kid's class, or very, very important jobs. and they can't afford to be here. And,
and even,
yeah.
Every job is important, but when you start looking at police officers and your firefighters and your nurses, even folks in those jobs have difficulty paying the rent and keeping themselves housed and being in our community.
One of the things that she talked about as well was that Kansas must invest in home to support economic growth. I mean, what exactly did she mean by that? What are we doing? Do we need to have more low-income housing tax credits? Do we need to have more programs? Do we need to have more incentives? Yeah. What do we need to do to encourage our builders to come in and be willing to build more affordable housing for our families?
Yeah. And I think that that's one thing with doing our countywide housing study, that we're trying to figure out, how do we get houses built in the smaller communities in our county as well as the larger ones? They can't compete against each other. It has to be something where we work together to figure out how to make that happen.
And then one other thing she brought up was to provide housing with supportive services to quickly stabilize Kansans in homelessness. So that's something that we're working on with the Sutherland Estates. This will be permanent supportive housing for our families. And you can't take people who've been traumatized, which homelessness is very traumatizing. And a lot of times they ended up there because of an event in their life and they just cannot move past it. So with those supportive services added to that, it really helps stabilize those families so that they can move forward.
Yeah.
And so you can't put a bunch of people together in a place, in housing of any type, and then say, here you go, I hope it all goes well. We've got to provide what they need in order to be able to be stable. We don't know what that is. Maybe it's parenting. Maybe it's education. Maybe it's, they need to see a therapist.
Yeah.
It's different for everybody. But
and then along with that is, we were all kids at one point, and some of us made bigger, stupid mistakes than others. But we have to be able to take care of those blemishes on our record, because quite honestly, there are jobs and landlords that is held against you if you have something like that on your record. And another thing that they talked about was, how do we make it so that evictions can be expunged off of somebody's record so it can't haunt them forever?
I know, I really like that one. I had never heard of that before.
Yeah.
Because, that happens a lot. Even with this low-income housing that we have in our area, if you have an eviction, they're not going to help. They're not going to work with you.
Yeah.
You're automatically going to get kicked out of that whole situation, and then where are you going to go?
Yeah.
I mean,
another thing that was brought up during this committee hearing was the fact that if you receive a Section 8 voucher, you are discriminated against. Your income, your source of income is discriminated against. So if you're on Social Security and you have a Section 8 housing voucher, we have landlords that say, nope, I will not rent to you because of where you get help with your rent. And the fact of the matter is, it shouldn't matter. As long as the rent gets paid to the landlord and they get their money every month, it shouldn't matter that this family needs a little help to make that happen. So I'm glad that that's another thing that's being talked about. Another point that I just found completely amazing was the information that Christina had regarding when the housing stock was built for different areas. So for McPherson County, a lot of our housing stock is 1971. My house was built in the 1920s.
Oh,
it's
wow.
like really old. But there must have been a huge housing boom back in 1971, and we had a lot of houses built.
Well, and I think something happened in that time period that made them stop building so many houses. I think something happened. I don't remember exactly what that story is, but I think something happened where some developers were coming in and they started developing really, really fast.
Okay.
And then somebody went bust, and then they had all this money out there for infrastructure that the city had put out that wasn't reimbursed, and they had to come up with ways to pay for that. And like I said, I might be talking out of school a little bit, but I know something serious happened. So that's when they started putting in all the regulations about what had to happen. Well, all those regulations about lot size requirements and having to have money put up front to be able to build in our community really slowed that down. And so somebody that came in here would have to be able to find a bank or somebody willing to lend them the money to build these subdivisions. Well, That's a lot of money out there for somebody who's an investor to have all that money sitting over here that you've had to put out and you're not getting a return.
Yeah.
That makes it really hard. I mean, you always have to have return on people that are willing to put their money out there for a project. And so that's what I think really slowed the growth in our community.
Well, when you look at across the state, the different counties, we're talking 1939, 1946, 1954. So 71 sounds really soon compared to some of the counties in our state and when the bulk of their housing was built. It's kind of crazy to actually see the information that she shared.
One of the things I really liked was they were talking about Montana, and I think you and I were at a hearing up in Topeka when they talked about this for the first time, but they've done some really interesting things, like they're allowing secondary units on property so that maybe a mother-in-law could move into a suite outside. Or, if you look at some of these older neighborhoods, there's little bitty houses in the back of these properties.
Yes.
And they use them as little rental properties, or maybe their son comes home from somewhere, the service or whatever, and he can live there for a while until he can get a job and then move out and do that. And then also allowing multifamily housing in commercial areas. Sometimes there's some stuff that stops that. And some of the other things they've talked about is zoning and setbacks. And what are we doing? Are we making this so complicated that it's cost prohibitive to build on a piece of property? I mean, when we think about some of the projects that we've done, we've got some pretty good setbacks on our lots that maybe had we have been able to go in and made those a little smaller, maybe we could have squeezed more in. I mean, we didn't do that. We possibly could have, but we were trying to get our project up pretty quickly. But that would have been another hearing and another process and all the stuff, and then more people can come in and talk about it. And so we need to really look at those zoning regulations. Are they really hurting people and making it harder for us to be able to build?
And another thing that somebody else brought up was if you have commercial businesses, you have commercial zoning, depending on that building, you can have businesses on the lower level, the street level, and have housing up above, kind of like the Main Street redevelopment that, we've been hearing about for the last few years. So there's some different ways to combine your different zoning to help alleviate some of that issues too.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like she did a great job with this presentation as far as what that looks like, understanding that we're all on this continuum, how many people were cost burdened, some of the things that we could do to alleviate all of that. There was some really great information on that. So I was looking at some more statistics. Actually, this was from the National Low Income Housing Coalition. I follow them pretty closely. They have great videos and great information. But they said there's a 52,340 shortage of that many homes in Kansas. 52,340 rental properties that were short. So again, it's economic supply and demand. When you have a shortage, people can do what they want to do because there's no competition.
Yeah.
So I can charge what I want, and somebody's probably going to pay it.
Absolutely. There will always be somebody that can pay more than the other person. And unfortunately, we have to be trying to come up with ways to make this better for everybody, realizing that housing it's not something we can go without. You have to have a place to live. It is a God-given right that you have a place to live. Unfortunately, our government and some of the policies that have been made over the past, like I said in the last podcast, decades have really hurt the situation. I think is just way more in everybody's face because you can't watch the news without hearing about homeless people. You can't go to the grocery store or go out to eat without seeing homeless people. And I think every community everywhere is dealing with it. Unfortunately, that is part of our reality, and we just need to work extra hard to do our part to alleviate.
There was some interesting takeaways as well that we could go over here. So it says build attainable housing by maintaining our state low-income housing tax credit match, making sure we're doing that. Although, and I personally think there's some tweaks that should be made to that. I would like to see them continue that to make sure that program is available to build affordable housing because they've built a lot of housing with this particular thing. And then we have maintain existing housing by providing a state revenue source to the State Housing Trust Fund for home repair, modification, and weatherization, which is something we haven't really talked about on this second part of our podcast here is that sometimes if we can maintain the housing stock that we have, that goes a long way into helping with our housing situation. Think about how many seniors that we've helped during Brush Up Mac. I think we fixed porches and put on roofs and repaired things.
Well, and we just helped a homeowner get a new roof on her house. As a matter of fact, that's going to happen in the month of December. She qualified for a $10,000 grant, and then she could have up to a $40,000 1% interest loan and 30 years to pay that off.
Yeah.
So she's going to be getting a new roof, and basically it's going to cost her out of pocket $3,000. So it's an amazing program. I love being able to talk to people about what we can do to help them.
And that house will now be available for the next person.
Absolutely.
Because she's been able to maintain that home. I mean, just today we were at, so I was out appraising, and I noticed that I was at a property, and there was a house falling down. It was out in the country, and I was like, I said to Derek, I was with my son, and I said, how in the world did they allow this house to deteriorate to this point where it's got to be torn down now? It looked like it was a fairly decent house at one point.
Yeah.
We've got to figure out how to maintain this housing for the people that are living there, especially our seniors that are disabled. If we can get those houses back in good shape, we would be it's so much better. And then even, we were talking to somebody on our board about the community he lives in. He said there's like 15 houses in his community that seniors have moved out of or people have passed away, and they're just sitting there.
Yeah.
And this is a tiny little community, and there's 15. Imagine if we could figure out what's going on with those empty houses that are in great shape across the country and even in our area.
Well, and that goes back to my comment earlier about how old our housing stock is. When you look at even McPherson. So there was a big 1971 is the date on this map that Christina shared. And it's like, okay, well, that housing is now 50 years old. So if your county has housing stock that's even older than that, yeah, we have to be able to maintain and rehabilitate and bring these properties up so a person could live there and actually use the house.
And then one of them I like too was provide targeted property tax relief, including for renters. So a lot of times what happens was even with somebody who rents, the landlord gets an increase in their property tax. Well, where do you think it goes? They're not going to take that and pay it. They're going to pass that on to the person who lives in their home. And so I think that's a great idea if you have low-cost housing that you do give them some kind of a break. And then, support Kansas homeowners and mom-and-pop landlords by strengthening the Kansas Landlord-Tenant Act, which I agree with that as well.
Yeah.
That does need to be changed. We've seen some pretty crazy things even in our community where even though there is a Kansas Tenant-Landlord Act, it's not illegal. So they're not going to get arrested for it. If they're doing that too, you're going to have to take them to civil court. It's a civil matter and not a criminal matter. That's what I'm trying to think about.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say. It's a civil matter. Well, how many low-income people do you know that have an attorney that's going to take somebody to court?
Exactly.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So I think that's pretty much the end of her information. I thought this is great information. And if anybody's interested in seeing it or knowing more about what was going on in Topeka, please reach out to us. McPhersonHousingCoalition.org. You can get our email addresses off there.
Yep, you can leave us a review or a comment. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know if there's a topic you'd like to hear about or somebody you want us to interview. You can leave that comment at housingforgood@mcphersonhc.org. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. We'll see you next time.